This week on the PRESSURECAST, CD Projekt Red gets held up for ransom, Sony disses backwards compatibility, and Bubsy is back. Yes, really. It's Friday, June 9th, 2017. Wait a minute, it's Friday? Hey, Pressure Pals. Welcome to the 185th episode of the PRESSURECAST, VideoGamesAreDumb.com's weekly news panic that posts every single Monday on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music, and America's longest-running independent newspaper at ShepherdExpress.com. My name is Colin Tanner, and I'm caffeinated and ready to ramble to you about some gosh darn video games. And yes, this is a Friday show. Why are we recording on Friday? Doesn't the PRESSURECAST come out on Monday? Normally it does. But, of course, this week we have E3. And for whatever reason, it's kicking off on Saturday with EA Play. Then on Sunday, there's going to be the Microsoft event, the Bethesda event. On Monday, we're going to have Ubisoft. Then we're going to have PlayStation, kind of a big one. And then, of course, on Tuesday, we're going to have the Nintendo Direct from Nintendo. I'll be doing individual podcasts for all of those trade shows. No, I will not be doing one for the PC show because usually big announcements don't happen there, but I'll probably sneak it in with the Ubisoft episode on Monday. So you're going to be getting a lot of PRESSURECAST over the next 5 days. So yes, if this episode is a little bit shorter, relax. You're going to get a ton of stuff in the near future. Anyway, we have a lot to get to this week. It might seem like, oh, just wait for E3. No. There is plenty of news that is going to get buried over the weekend, so we need to get to it now. That means we got to get on the train. Chug, 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 chug. Here comes the train. Tooty toot toot. Boop, boop. That's right. It's time for the hype train. Feel the PR vibrations as we barrel towards video games based on the hype train. This is part of the show. We talk about all the upcoming video games and events to get you hyped up to spend all your money and become a video game guru. And yes, we're less than 48 hours away from E3, as well as the reveal of the brand new Xbox One Scorpio. However, one of the biggest stories of the week isn't about this generation, but the last generation. How could that be? Well, during an interview with Time Magazine last week, the head of PlayStation marketing, global sales and marketing, Jim Ryan, was discussing the strengths of Sony's brand over their Microsoft competitor, highlighting the sales ratio in America, which is now 2-1, and the European sales ratio, which is now 3-1. At one point, though, the conversation turned to backwards compatibility. While the Xbox One currently supports over 386 Xbox 360 titles on Xbox One, Sony has avoided hardware compatibility altogether. According to Jim Ryan, quote, "We've dabbled with backwards compatibility." He's talking about PlayStation right now. "I could say it's one of those features that is requested, but not actually used all that much. I was at a Gran Turismo event where recently they had the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4 games, and the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games, they looked ancient. Why would anybody play this?" End quote. Over the next day, a number of editorials criticized Ryan's comments as deaf to consumer preferences, as well as establishing a talking point for the Microsoft's upcoming press conference. Obviously, Microsoft is going to hit back for that statement, right? Maybe. Because it just so happens, only 24 hours after Ryan's comments, the tech analyst website Ars Technica published a report on Xbox One users' console habits based off of time. Between September 26, 2016 and February 12, 2017, 54.7% of time spent on the Xbox One was spent playing games. Pretty obvious. It's a game console after all. 16.5% of their time was spent watching Netflix. Makes sense. It's a set-top box. Totally acceptable. 14.1% of the time was spent using other non-game related apps, followed by the TV app at 6.7%. Yes, people are still really using the TV app on the Xbox One. And then YouTube at 6.6%. I can't believe that more people are using the TV app than YouTube, but whatever. Now, way down at the very bottom, at only 1.5% of the time was spent playing Xbox 360 games through backwards compatibility. On average, less than 24 minutes were used altogether per user. So the average person spent 24 minutes over the past 6 months playing an Xbox 360 game on their Xbox One. So that adds a lot of validity to Jim Ryan's statements. Now, it is worth noting that this data was only collected between, whenever it started. I already forgot. Was it September? September through February. And that's 2 months before the long-in-demand Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was added to the program, which proved to be so popular, it became the 10th best-selling game in the month of April. And Ars Technica themselves point that out, saying 3 out of 4 per 1,000 active users did play Call of Duty Black Ops 2 on their Xbox One. But, excluding that title, backwards compatibility easily ranks as one of the least popular features on the Xbox One, trailing well behind the built-in web browser Microsoft Edge. Yes, really, people are using a web browser on their Xbox One more than they're using backwards compatibility, and just slightly above the Blu-ray player, which of course is only in the Xbox One S. That's not even in all Xboxes, and yet it still, almost beats out backwards compatibility, which you would assume would be a killer app. Now also consider that Xbox Live's Games with Gold includes 2 free backwards compatible Xbox 360 games per month. If you've got Games with Gold, you're getting 2 of those games per month. And yet, that has no influence on how often or how long people are playing those backwards compatible games. I guess I shouldn't say there's no influence, but it's obviously not being a sizable one. But this emphasizes the difference between demand and use, and that's what I really want to get to. See, back in 2012, GameSpot surveyed a bunch of players. What do you want in the next console? This is 2012, obviously it would be another year before we heard about the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And of those users surveyed, 83% said they wanted some form of backwards compatibility in their next console. But this isn't simply limited to backwards compatibility. In the same survey, over a quarter of players wanted better motion controls and better compatibility with 3D TVs. Obviously, neither of those proved to be a factor in console sales. So what exactly is the disconnect? How are players demanding things or requesting things that at the end of the day they don't really want? Why are they being so disingenuous? Well, in short, they're not. In fact, I did a little bit of research on just the subject of demand and intent. And in a 2001 paper that was called The Distinction Between Desire and Intention, let's try it again. It was a 2001 paper called The Distinction Between Desire and Intention, a folk conceptual analysis. Bertman F. Malley and Joshua Knob explained the difference between will and commitment and its process. Here's a quote from that paper. First, an agent indicates commitment by making early investments, e.g. buying a concert ticket in advance. Second, an agent indicates commitment by accepting the opportunity costs of not pursuing alternative courses of action, best indicated when such alternatives become in fact available. Third, an agent indicates commitment by accepting, sometimes inviting, sanctions from others in case she does not fulfill the intention. End quote. If you didn't really understand that, it just basically means users might say they want backwards compatibility, they may claim it is a vital element to their purchasing decision, but once that option becomes available, they largely go for newer games. And because there's no risk of losing that opportunity, backwards compatibility will always be there. They have no risk of losing it and no repercussions whatsoever because it is a free feature. They don't lose out on the money that they spent. They don't have to live up to their stated intention. Now, regarding Sony's decision to ignore backwards compatibility completely, well, that's best summarized once again by Malley and Knob. Quote, if the agent shows no indication of commitment, the attitude will be classified as a desire. If the agent does show commitment, the attitude will be classified as intention, end quote. Which basically means people desire, but they do not actually intend to use backwards compatibility. And that's what Sony has understood. And it's worth pointing out that, the Xbox 360 was the best-selling console last generation in America, specifically America. I want to point that out. And yet, the PlayStation 4 sales are doubling the Xbox One sales. Even though it's almost assured that these people have a not backwards, but they have a catalog of Xbox 360 games, they're still going for PlayStation 4. And that's a shame. From a fan perspective, we like to believe that these classics from just, only 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago are still being enjoyed to this day. But they're not. And from a technical point of view, it's really disappointing because you want to believe that people are taking advantage of this amazing Xbox 360 emulation, this mammoth technical undertaking to make that available on the Xbox One. But they're not. And from a business angle, a publisher's back catalog cannot simply be resold with no effort. You have to create HD remasters or people won't take it seriously at all. They won't even bother with it. I can only imagine what the sales are if they're only spending 1.5% time actually playing those games. Or to address, I guess, Jim Ryan's point directly, why would anybody play this? Well, the answer is they'd like to. The answer is that they can. But the truth is, they won't. And who would know better than Sony, a company that supported 3 generations of game consoles on the PlayStation 3, as well as the Linux operating system, camera photo storage, and printer connectivity, and whose sales would drastically improve once those features were removed. I'm just saying, backwards compatibility is wonderful. In theory, in concept. It makes people excited, but they just don't use it. So yeah, that's basically the whole thing right there. It sucks, but what are you gonna do? People say they want it, but they don't actually use it. Toot toot. But now on to our biggest story of the week. They are making another goddamn Bubsy game. Yes, really. I'm not kidding. Yes, really. Once again, Bubsy the Bobcat. Yes, really. They are making another Bubsy game. I'm not kidding. It's not a remake. It is a sequel. Yes, really. They are making another Bubsy game. It is called Bubsy the Woolly Strike Back, and it's been officially announced by Accolade, which is somehow still a thing, who knows. This follows the 2015 re-release of the original 16-bit games on Steam, though this will be the first game in the Bubsy series since 1996's Bubsy 3D, and we all know how well that one turned out, don't we? The game will retain the 2.5D style, which is the signature style of the Bubsy games, but with modern graphics, and it will arrive this fall on the PlayStation 4 and PC. Okay then. I mean, hey, if you're a Bubsy fan, you've been like, why don't they make more Bubsy? Now's your chance. If you're a Bubsy purist, how are you going to react to this news? But truth be told, Bubsy was never good. I remember playing it when it came out. I rented it from Blockbuster. First stage was kind of interesting, but it was never a good game. Never, ever. Ever, ever. I don't know anyone that actually likes Bubsy. I've never met anyone that likes Bubsy. I've known people that are nostalgic for Bubsy, but to actually enjoy the game, no. And the footage that they showed off, well, it looked really rough. It looked very rough. But more concerning, it just looked like it had the exact same jump physics. And in case you don't know, Bubsy was like this mascot from the mid-90s. He's the orange cat with the exclamation point on a white t-shirt. He even had a cartoon series for a while. What could possibly go wrong? Lots of things went wrong. I mean, it's just the fact that they put up 4 games. None of them were good because the jumping was so stiff and the movement was really sluggish, and then it would get slippery and it was so easy to die. Everything killed Bubsy and he had 9 lives because he was a cat. Nobody wants this. But it is kind of hilarious that's happening. Best of luck, Accolade. Toot toot. Last week, Nintendo held a surprise Nintendo Direct centered around the Pokemon franchise, leading many to believe that the series would finally make its debut on the Nintendo Switch. And in a way, it will. The 2016 Wii U Arcade Fighter Pokken Tournament, yes, not a real Pokemon game, will be released on the Nintendo Switch on September 22nd. Players will now be able to engage in 3 vs 3 battles, both locally and online. The entire 16 character roster will return with 5 additional characters that I don't know how to pronounce, but we're going to try it anyway. Decidii, Krogunk, Sizor, oh, I think I know that one. Empoleon, and Dark Ray. Okay then. There's more Pokemon news later here, but we're going to be talking about that in Pocket Talk, not in the Hype Train, so we'll talk about the other stuff they had during the Direct later. Second, could there be anything more disappointing when it comes to a Pokemon announcement? I mean, there's a Nintendo Direct. They announced a Nintendo Direct. You hear that something's going to be happening on the Switch. You think it's going to be like a big, old-school RPG. Maybe they're porting one of the 3DS games. But no. Instead, we're just getting this average fighting game. And I played Pokken on the Wii U, so I can say that, because in many aspects, it's highly original. It's highly accessible. Anyone can play it. It's, but it's not very good. it's a really boring fighting game. It's too simple for regular fighting game fans or even like Smash Bros fans, maybe for like a small child. But I assume this has something to do with the relationship between Bandai Namco and Nintendo. I mean, they spent a lot of resources producing this fighting game, and I'm sure they're trying to make up for that. And Nintendo is just trying to be a good partner, which is good for them. But, you know, it's just depressing that this is coming out in September. And so far, Nintendo's only been publishing one game a month, which means that this is probably it for September. This is how they're kicking off the fall season, is Pokken Tournament DX. No thank you. Toot toot. Speaking of fighting games, Square Enix has announced the third version of Dissidia Final Fantasy. Dissidia? Did I say that right? Simply titled Dissidia Final Fantasy NT, the game will once again feature a mashup of Final Fantasy characters as they face off in 3 vs 3 battles. Though Dissidia has been released on the PSP and arcade since its debut in 2008, this will mark the first time the series lands on a home console. Dissidia Final Fantasy NT will be released on the PlayStation 4 in Japan and is being developed by Team Ninja, the studio behind Ninja Gaiden, Dead or Alive, and Nioh. You know, I've owned a PSP, I own multiple PSPs, and I've never played this series. I've always wanted to, but I never got around to actually playing it. So I'm looking forward to this, but it does make me question the current direction of Final Fantasy. I mean, they have tons of offshoots like this, you know, where they're taking all of their characters and putting them all in one giant game. Look at what they did with World of Final Fantasy. I mean, they've always had spin-offs when it comes to Final Fantasy. Back in the day, it was like, you know, Chocobo Dungeon Crawler, or like fighting game cameos where they had some of their characters. And then later on, of course, they tried to do things like Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus and Final Fantasy IV the later years, which were kind of like semi-sequels, you know, adding to the canon of individual Final Fantasy games. But now it feels like they're just throwing all the games into one big game. Like I said, World of Final Fantasy or another Dissidia. And from one perspective, I can respect that because, well, they're not fucking with the canon of the individual games. This is all just pure fan service, and I can appreciate that a little bit more. But on the other hand, this feels kind of lazy, you know, like they're just throwing all the characters in there and just slapping the name Final Fantasy on it. And I know some people are going to say, well, that's fine. It's no big deal. But I kind of care because I want Square to do more things than Final Fantasy. Now, don't get me wrong, Square Enix does a lot. They publish the IDOS games, they publish Dragon Quest, but Squaresoft, before they merged, they were like a really big developer and publisher. Why don't they make like a new franchise? Or why don't they actually make a sequel to some of their old franchises? I mean, it's been almost 20 years since they made a Bushido Blade, or, you know, 7 or 8 years since they made a Parasite Eve, or Brave Fencer Musashi, or Front Mission. And I know this is slightly off topic, but I just don't understand how Squaresoft just let all of their original IPs completely evaporate. But Dissidia looks okay, so whatever. Toot toot! Way back in 2011, Epic Games announced Fortnite, the very first game ever developed with Unreal Engine 4, a multiplayer tower defense third-person shooter where players create and defend their own forts and then fight an army of undead zombies. Now 6 years later, it's pretty obvious. That game is not going to be the very first Unreal Engine 4 game to be released. there might have been a bit of a hiccup. But this week, Epic officially announced Fortnite's early access debut next month on July 25th for the PC, Mac, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. Yet, despite being labeled early access, players will be able to purchase 4 different versions of the game, ranging from the $40 edition, which just gives you game access, to the $150 special edition that includes lots of in-game bonuses. Worth noting that the $59.99 version will be available in retail for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. No word if that's going to be happening on July 25th as well, and users who pre-order will also be given access 4 days ahead of time. So that'll be July 21st if you want to get in onto Fortnite. Now, if you've never heard of Fortnite, I do not blame you. It has been like an industry joke since at least 2015. But having watched the trailer, I could say I'm cautiously optimistic. The user interface for the building looks super clean, the shooting looks impactful, there's a cartoonish vibe that just seems to hit the right balance between looking badass. It's not too like Plants vs. Zombies. It looks good, you know, I'm excited, like cool. We have something to play in late July. Sounds awesome. But then you read these pre-order things and it feels like it's a little different story. I mean, why the fuck should anyone be able to spend $150 to pre-order an early access game? This isn't even the real game yet. This is early access. And why exactly is it early access? Like, what are you going to do? Add more stuff into your online multiplayer game? They've been doing that since, like, I don't know, the late 90s. So how can you rationalize that? I'm just worried that they might be putting too much of an emphasis on microtransactions. And I have nothing against microtransactions. If you want to put thousands of dollars of stuff in your store, that is fine by me, as long as the game is balanced. And that's really the key word there. But there's usually a grace period. They release a game, and then you have all these options of things that you can buy. And then, you know, they start trickling in more and more and more. But it's before the game's even out. It's $150. For an early access copy. I mean, of course you don't have to buy the $150 edition. I'm just saying, why? Why does that even exist? I don't know. Toot toot. Since The Binding of Isaac released way back in 2011, creator Ed McMillan has been preoccupied with a series of ports and updates to his hyper-gross dungeon crawler. Now, for the first time in over 6 years, McMillan has announced his first major original game. The End Is Nigh is an intense 2D platformer that is heavily resembling his previous game, Super Meat Boy, which McMillan obviously also created. And this game is being co-developed by Tyler Gaylor, best known for his 2012 game Closure, which was out on PS3 I want to say, and PC. The End Is Nigh will release on Steam on July 12th. A Nintendo Switch port has also been announced, though no exact release date was given. Seriously, this game looks identical to Super Meat Boy, except it's not red and orange, it's black and white. That's basically what The End Is Nigh is. But I really don't blame Ed McMillan for making something incredibly simple. Because say what you will about Binding of Isaac, there's a ton of work put into every single update and every single port. I'm sure it must be nice for him to just sit back and make something that's really straightforward, something he knows how to make. But let's just hope McMillan steps it up and has some new ideas. He even mentions it, you know, when he's talking about the game, that, yeah, he's got other stuff that he wants to get back to, and I hope so. Binding of Isaac is cool, this looks cool, Super Meat Boy is cool, but what else you got, man? What are those new ideas? Just saying. Toot toot. And speaking of platformers, Capcom have announced the Mega Man Legacy Collection 2. Mega Man Legacy Collection 2, which will be a follow-up compilation to the 2015 original. While the first centered around the Blue Bombers 8-bit outings, this second package will include Mega Man 7, 8, 9, and 10, and will feature a quick save ability, production art, and a challenge mode, and of course, leaderboards. Mega Man Collection 2 will be released on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC later this August. I know we shouldn't be surprised by this, but I'm kind of surprised by this. I mean, I know Capcom needs quick cash right now. They are just not selling as many games as they would like to, so they are putting out these re-releases, and why not? They have a hell of a back catalog. But these particular games, that's questionable. See, the original collection, that was Mega Man 1 through 6, which everyone can agree were good games. Now, were they all amazing? You know, some were better than others. Let's be honest here. The NES era of Mega Man was not spotless, but they were all good. You could absolutely say they were all good. But starting with Mega Man 7, the quality starts to wildly fluctuate. You see, back in the old days, Mega Man 1 through 6, they had one console to work against, really experiment with, and see what they could push back against. That's why Mega Man always stood out. But then Mega Man 7, it was on the SNES. And the follow-up, Mega Man 8, was on the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Now, of course, there was also Mega Man and Bass on the Super Nintendo, but that's besides the point. And then Mega Man 9 and Mega Man 10 were released, but that was on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 and the Wii. They're just kind of all over the place. It doesn't have that cohesive collection anymore. But here's the thing. Mega Man 7 and 8 just aren't very good games. I mean, 9 was awesome, and, well, that's about it. Even 10 felt a lot less inspired. I'm incredibly excited on one aspect. I really want to see how they handle the voice acting from Mega Man 8's cutscenes. Because, let me tell you here, Mega Man 8 has some of the best cutscenes ever in video games. They have the worst voice acting ever in video games, but, you know, it's so funny, I hope they'll leave it in. Seriously, Google right now, stop the show, go and Google Mega Man 8 cutscenes, and just sit there and listen to it. It's fucking ridiculous. And finally on the hype train, toot toot, finally on the hype train, to no one's surprise, Shenmue 3 has been delayed. Now releasing in the second half of 2018, Shenmue 3 will arrive 17 years after its last entry on the Dreamcast, which of course was later ported on the Xbox. Now that's really the whole story here, but you know, in case you've never heard of Shenmue, it was a series that launched on the Dreamcast. It was made by Yu Suzuki, the creator behind things like Hang On, Outrun, Virtual Fighter, just so much stuff. He's basically a genius. And the game took place in the 1980s. You kind of ran around. It was all like Yakuza. If you ever played Yakuza on the PS2, PlayStation 3, or PlayStation 4, it basically was a prototype for Yakuza, but a lot more story-centric and a lot more real life. And when I mean real life, it would be like, oh, you have to come back here at 5 o'clock, and you'd have to go run around the world and do stuff until 5 o'clock. You'd go into shops and buy things. It's hard to explain now because so many games have borrowed from Shenmue, but it was a huge deal. So they made Shenmue 1, they made Shenmue 2, Shenmue 3 never came out. Sega apparently canceled the production before it could even get started, and so for years and years and years and years, fans like me, because I'm a huge Shenmue fan, were like, where the fuck is this sequel? We want a sequel! Come on, Sega, give us a sequel! And then everybody gave up because it was like, well, it's been 15 years, that's not fucking happening. And then out of nowhere, Yu Suzuki's like, alright, we're going to Kickstarter. And everybody funded it. So, if you're a fan of Shenmue, I don't imagine anyone is mad about this. No one is mad about this. No one. You know, because you've been waiting 17 years. It's like another year, big deal. You know, unless you get hit by a bus, in which case, fuck you, Yu Suzuki, but, you know, it's like, I can't be mad about that. Especially when you watch the video that actually has Yu Suzuki making the announcement. It's such a good video, because it's not highly produced. It is just a plain white background. There's no edits, there's no music. He just stands there and goes, you know, we want to do some more stuff with this game. It's going to take more time, and I'm sorry about that. You know, please stay excited, blah, blah, blah. That was it. Because, you know, you can see in his eyes, he's working hard. Because he's been trying to get this game made for like 15 years himself, so you can tell that he really cares. That, or I'm just completely insane because I'm a Shenmue fan to begin with. Anyway, toot toot. Let's talk about the games that are going to be coming out this week in stores. Yes, believe it or not, there are going to be games that are going to be coming out alongside E3. Go figure. On Tuesday, Cars 3, Driven to Win, will be out on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, PlayStation 3, and Wii U. Wow, Cars 3. Go get it. You can play as Steve fucking McQueen or whatever the fuck I've never seen Cars. Fuck that shit. Alright, on Thursday, MotoGP 17 will be on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Pro Cycling Manager 2017 will be out on the PC. There's the pick of the week. Azura Striker Gunvolt Striker Pack. Yes, will be on the Nintendo Switch. I played those games on the 3DS. They're very good. You want to check those out for sure. Pixel Heroes Bite and Magic will be on the PlayStation 4. And finally, on Friday, on the Nintendo Switch, ARMS will be released. I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm going to give that game a review. Just you wait. I'll show you all. I'll show you all. Beep, beep. That's going to do it for the Hype Train. Believe it or not, we're already halfway through the episode, maybe even less, because this is going to be a short episode. But like I already said, we're going to have 5 episodes of the PRESSURECAST individually dedicated to each of the press conferences, so stay tuned for that. They will not be videos. I mean, they will be on the YouTube page, but they will not be actual videos. Just keep that in mind. I want to make sure you understand that. So if you just see a picture and like, what's going on? It's because I need to make sure the videos come out in a timely manner, and by doing video, that will require more processing, which requires more time, and I want to get those out for you and fast. Because come on, if you're watching the show, you got multiple browsers open. It's a long video to watch. Come on, you can admit to me. You can admit it. Anyway, that was me just blowing a lot of hot air, wasn't it? I need to go outside. I know a place that's always warm with the glow of cold hard cash. That's right, it's time for... The Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. Yes, the Chart Park. This is part of the show we talk about the legal, business, and financial news in the video game industry. And we find out which fat cats of Wall Street are going to tip their top hats towards Lady Luck. We have to start off with some kind of scary news. The Witcher 3 developer CD Projekt Red is apparently being held up for ransom. Yes, really. I don't mean to allude to the idea that there are people inside of the studio right now, you know, with guns pointed at their heads. That's not the case. It is a digital ransom, to be clear. In fact, CD Projekt Red broke the news themselves by just announcing it on Twitter. Here's what they said. Quote, an unidentified individual or individuals have just informed us that they are in possession of a few internal files belonging to CD Projekt Red. Among them are documents connected to early designs for the upcoming game CD Projekt Red. A demand for ransom has been made, saying that should we not comply, the files will be released to the general public. We will not be giving in to the demands of the individual or individuals that have contacted us, which might eventually lead to the files being published online. The appropriate legal authorities will be informed about the situation. The documents are old and largely unrepresentative of the current vision for the game. Still, if you're looking forward to playing CD Projekt Red Cyberpunk 2077, it would be best to avoid any information that does not directly come from CD Projekt Red. When the time is right, you will hear about Cyberpunk 2077 from us, officially, end quote. CD Projekt Red first announced Cyberpunk 2077 in 2012 with a CG trailer the following year. Since then, there's been no word on the game's progress. Well, at least not publicly. But let me tell you, I fucking love this story. Not because I don't like CD Projekt Red, I respect them. They make the Witcher games. I don't even really like The Witcher, but I can respect them as a studio. But why do I love this story? Because how fucking stupid do you need to be to try and ransom video games? Because like, for real, let's just assume they have a version of Cyberpunk, right? Like, I keep on saying CD Projekt Red. Let's just imagine they actually have a copy of Cyberpunk. Have you seen how sick and tired everyone is of unfinished games being released? There are so many games that are on store shelves right now that people go, this is unfinished garbage, and they throw a big hissy fit. There is so much good stuff out there that people actually want to play, and people are also so fucking concerned with spoilers. Why would anyone want to see an unfinished, spoiler-filled version of a game that they're actually excited for? Especially when there's other things to play. Okay? Now let's say that they don't have a playable version of the game. Let's just assume they have trailers and art. Ooh. Oh no. You got the trailers? You got the concept art? Oh no. Oh my god. Well, CD Projekt Red, you better pay up or else they're gonna release that stuff? Who the fuck cares? I mean, I'm sure CD Projekt Red cares. They're not happy about the situation. But they're not going to pay you to buy back their stuff, you idiots. We're going to be following this story very closely. I cannot wait to see these guys get caught, because they will get caught. They will. They always get caught. Except for that one person that released Half-Life 2 early. They never got caught. One of them did. But not all of them. Anyway, moving back to legal news, or I guess moving on to legal news, I guess these are both legal stories. Back in September of 2015, the city of Chicago, Illinois, expanded its amusement tax to also include streaming, subscriptions, and games at a tax rate of 9%. Now the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, has filed a lawsuit against the city of Chicago, describing the tax against, quote, ordinary Chicagoans by forcing gamers to pay for their elected officials' budget mistakes, literally, end quote. So yeah, they're going pretty bold here. The ESA's CEO, Michael D. Gallagher, also chimed in, stating, quote, as one of the most innovative and rapidly growing industries in Illinois, we are proud to take this fight to court and stand up for the consumers. Chicago's tax bureaucrats are out of line and extending their reach beyond legal limits imposed by federal law. We intend to remedy that situation. Maybe it's because we're talking about Chicago, or the way that guy was talking, but I just imagine him having like a big like stogie cigar. It's like, you bureaucrats are way out of line. So obviously we could get into a conversation about taxes, but I doubt that would increase views on this YouTube video and downloads of this MP3. So we're not going to talk about taxes per se, but we are going to talk about why this is happening, particularly the lawsuit. You might not be familiar with the ESA, but they are the funded group that are meant to represent the major publishers in North America. They put on trade shows like E3, but another part of this whole business and the reason why publishers pay them is because they are lobbyists meant to represent the video game industry. So when a political action impedes the well-being of their members, allegedly, they will take steps to rectify that, as they have done here. Now, is that 9%? That 9% tax, is that really killing game sales? Is that extra $5 on every $60 game? Is that killing game sales? Probably not. It may have an impact, but it's probably not killing sales. However, the ESA want to discourage this model of taxation. They do not want to see it expand as time goes on. And to prevent that, they are getting way ahead of this and saying, no, this right here, this 9% tax, that's too goddamn high. We don't want that. So they're resorting to a lawsuit with the city. Also, keep in mind, Chicago is a huge, and I mean huge industry, or just a huge consumer group of video games. It's the Midwest. It's cold outside for 8 months out of the year. The sun sets at like 4 o'clock and then it's negative a million outside. And what are you going to do? You're going to go out and just like drink to death? Or are you going to stay inside and play some games? You're probably going to play some games. That's basically the whole story right now, but we'll definitely cover this as time goes on because it's absolutely fascinating. We don't often get an opportunity to talk about, taxes, the United States government, local government like Chicago, and of course the ESA, who rarely ever get put out in stories like this. And do not confuse them with the ESRB. They are not related. Anyway, moving on. Jay Pinkerton is a man with a name reminiscent of a 1996 Weezer album. But no, that's not his greatest claim to fame. In fact, Jay Pinkerton joined Valve and went on to write the 2011 game Portal 2. Last week, he announced his departure from the company after 9 years, which makes sense considering he didn't write anything else. However, Pinkerton's departure marks the 4th writer to leave Valve in just the past 2 years. And that's your whole story. And a lot of news sites are covering this, and so we are covering it here because we always like to cover when people are leaving or when they're getting hired or when they're going to different companies, someone of relevance. This guy wrote one game. Not knocking him. I'm not insulting the guy, but he wrote one game. 6 years ago. A lot of the stories are from 2011. You notice that? Fortnite, Ed McMillan's first game since 2011, now this, 2011. All I'm trying to say is, yes, they're getting rid of the writers. And I don't understand why this is still like news, because we know why they're getting rid of the writers. Valve is done making games. If they make games, they will not have stories. They will have loot packs. They will have things to sell. It will be more stuff for Dota. They are done with video games. They will maintain Dota. They will maintain CSGO. They will maintain Team Fortress. But they will not, in the near future, release a new video game? Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're gonna release Half-Life 3? Fuck no. And even if, like, you're thinking, oh, this is preventing Half-Life 3. No, come on, think about it for just 1 second here. How long do you think it takes to write a video game? Let me tell you, it takes like 5 minutes. You write down, protagonist picks up gun, and then happy ending. You just scribble out the word gun and write, portal gun or gravity gun. That's how you write a Half-Life. All right, I'm being a jerk. I'm sorry. We'll move on. And finally in the chart park, Sony has announced that the PlayStation VR headset has now sold over 1 million units, meaning Sony sold 85,000 units since February of this year. And that's really the whole story. But I do want to bring this up because I'm really curious to see how Sony positions, the PlayStation VR in their press conference at E3. And they've already said that I don't imagine it's going to take up more than 3 minutes. Maybe they'll have one game. All right, one game that they'll be like, this is a VR game. Whoa! And then they'll have another minute, which is like, like a montage video where it's like, it just has a bunch of music and it's like flashing images. They'll be straight out of like 1995 Sony. It'll be like PlayStation VR. And I'm sure they're going to be like, this game is going to be out this year and it's also going to have PlayStation VR support, but they're not going to show it. It's all going to be on the stage floor. But I'm really curious. I want to know what they're going to do. Still, that puts Sony way ahead of other headset manufacturers, except for the HTC, not the HTC Vive, the Gear VR from Oculus and Samsung. They're way ahead of everyone else. But if you talk about actual premium headsets, it's Sony by a mile. Anyway, let's get on to the charts. Here are the top 10 best-selling games over in the UK for the month. Not the month, for the week. that we just passed in the UK. Number 10 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Number 9 was Rocket League. Number 8 was Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 7 was Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Wildlands. Number 6 was Prey. Number 5 was FIFA 17. I have a theory that they like football over there in England. Number 4 was Grand Theft Auto 5, because of course it is. Number 3 was Injustice 2. Number 2 was Overwatch, because of course it is. And number 1, with a fist to the face, it's Tekken 7. Yeah. FYI, I'm not going to be putting out a episode of Worth It on Tekken 7. The servers are in such disrepair that I feel it would be disingenuous for me to criticize, not to criticize, but to fully review that game. And I could put out an impression video, but I feel the information I have is currently too limited to even do that. Because I am not very good at Tekken, I'm not very good at fighting games in general, but I get a hell of a lot better by playing against people that are good. And because the servers, and I'm not exaggerating, I spent 2 hours trying to connect to a single game 2 days ago, was unable to. 2 hours trying to connect to one game. Wouldn't do it. And I know that it's not my internet because I went on to play other things like Mario Kart, which is also a peer-to-peer system. And, you know, I played the ARMS demo over the last weekend, and I had no issue with that either. So that is obviously on Namco Bandai, and you go on Twitter and it's a fucking mess. It's a fucking mess. But yeah, so I can't review that right now. Sorry. Just want to be honest with you, though. That's the reason why. Now let's go to the cursed land of trains, known as Japan, to find out what the 10 best-selling games over there. Number 10 was Ultra Street Fighter 2, The Final Challengers. Number 9 was Dragon Ball Heroes Ultimate Mission X on 3DS. Number 8 was Deathmark on the PlayStation Vita. Number 7 was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch. Number 6 was Ys 8, Lacrimas of Dana on the PlayStation 4. That was last week's best-selling game. It's already down to 6, so I guess we're probably not going to see that in the top 10 for much longer. Number 5 was Monster Hunter XX on the PlayStation, on the 3DS. Big distinction there. Number 4 was Tatsutomo, 12 Memories on the Vita. Number 3 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch. Number 2 was Senseki Detsu Collection on the Nintendo Switch, which is Secret of Mana, which is kind of cool. And number 1, just like the UK, it's Tekken 7, which I can't really review, but that's on the PlayStation 4. But I see you there. You're like, what were the best-selling consoles over there in Japan? Well, I'll tell you, mister. Starting off with the Nintendo Switch with 23,524, PlayStation 4 with 15,854, new 3DS LL with 12,676, PlayStation 4 Pro with 5,492, PlayStation Vita with 4,454, 2DS with 2,904, new 3DS with 915, PlayStation 3 with 714, Wii U with 221. And in last place, for the 4th week in a row, it's the Xbox One. You know what? I wonder if the Scorpio can do something here in Japan. Maybe it can. Let's be optimistic. But that's going to do it for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. We've talked about the big money, but now it's time to talk about the smaller things. That's right, it's time to get tiny. It's time for Pocket Doc, Pocket Doc, Pocket Doc. This is where we're talking about all the handheld and mobile news in the video game industry. And yes, we were talking about Pokken earlier, because there, of course, there was the Pokemon Nintendo Direct. But there was more to that Nintendo Direct, and, well, here it is. Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon have been announced for the 3DS and will be released later this year on November 17th. These versions will feature an alternative story and more Pokemon, as well as more yet-to-be-named features. However, the biggest story from the Direct came from the Game Boy. Yes, the Game Boy. The old-school Game Boy. Nintendo has announced Pokemon Gold and Silver will be released on the 3DS Virtual Console later this year on September 22nd. And that's really the whole story right there. And that's kind of the sad part of it all. I mean, let's think about this for a second. They held a Nintendo Direct for Pokemon. Holy shit, for Pokemon? The biggest franchise in the world, pretty much. I mean, do you remember Pokemon Go? That took the world by storm. Yeah, and you look at those 3DS sales. Every time they release a Pokemon, holy shit, Pokemon is huge. And what do? They announced a 2-year-old fighting game, a 1-year-old RPG re-release, and a 17-year-old RPG. Now, I'm not saying that those aren't exciting announcements if you're into that sort of thing, but what exactly was the point of making this a Nintendo Direct? Just put that trailer out on your YouTube page and we're good. Now, I understand they could do that with everything. They don't need to do Nintendo Directs at all. But the point of the Nintendo Direct was to have these individual events around certain announcements, you know, where you could actually explain things in longer form. But we know what Pokken is. We definitely know what Gold and Silver is. I mean, and that other Pokemon game, Sun and Moon, that, you know, what? It's not even a year old. What are you doing? Like, really? What are you doing? If you're gonna have a Nintendo Direct, you want to make sure it has big news. Things that are big deals. New games, at the very least. New games we haven't seen before. Otherwise, you're creating diminishing returns, and people will have less expectations for Nintendo Direct. And when they have less expectation, there's less enthusiasm, and which means there's less excitement, obviously. And then you lose that special moment. It just becomes another thing. It becomes no different, actually, than a YouTube trailer. And that would be sad. But that's gonna do it for Pocket Doc, Pocket Doc, Pocket Doc. Let's take the mushroom. We have now come to the final segment of the show. It is where we take a look back at the week that was, 10 years ago and beyond. And a little something we like to call Strong History. 10 years ago, this week on the Nintendo Wii, Scarface, The World Is Yours was released. They might be saying, oh, okay, great. They made a crappy license game and it was on the Wii. Please stop talking. I don't need to listen to you, you dumbo. Dumbo, is that actually an insult? That's a pretty good insult. Sounds like it belongs in Scarface. But hear me out. Scarface on the Wii, as well as the PlayStation 2, as well as the PC, as well as the original Xbox, is one of the best games of that generation. Huh? What are you talking about? Hear me out. Scarface is basically a more authentic version of, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. It is an alternative version of the Scarface movie. It is a sequel directly to the movie. And if you've seen the movie and you're like, how is that possible? Trust me, it's basically fan fiction, and it's awesome. I actually like the story better than the movie. Now, what you do in the game is you go throughout Miami, you buy up businesses, and then you just beat the fuck out of people. You use chainsaws. And on the Wii version, you actually had to swing the Wiimote and cut people down with the chainsaw. It was ridiculous. But what's really cool about this game is that there's two separate areas that you play in. The city, where of course there's law and order, and then there is an island where there's no law and order. So basically you're having to watch everything you do, don't run over anybody, be real careful, and then you go over to this island and they're just people with Uzis chasing after you, and it's like a war, man. It is amazing. It is one of the best open world games, and I would like to consider myself a bit of an aficionado when it comes to open world games. I played a lot of them, and I can easily say Scarface is one of the best. It absolutely deserves a re-release. Just get the license, forget about the soundtrack, even though the soundtrack is quite good. And I guess if you have an original Xbox or an original Wii, pick yourself up a copy of this. You won't regret it. It is... yeah, it's a masterpiece. I'll say that. I mean, hey, you can get a leopard fur car. That's awesome. Also, 10 years ago on the Xbox 360, Tenchu Z was released. And this game right here is heartbreaking. In case you don't know, Tenchu was a PlayStation 1 franchise that involves stealth. It actually was released before Metal Gear Solid, and so many people were impressed by it. And then Tenchu 2 also came out, Tenchu 3. You're basically ninjas back in ancient Japan, and you're cutting down people with stealth attacks. Like, the violence in the game is brutal. You're cutting off heads, you're stabbing people right through the stomach, you're stabbing them through the skull. That's your reward. If you attack them with stealth, you get these cool animations. But then this franchise, it went dormant. And the last one that I remember is Tenchu Z on the Xbox 360, which I believe is a digital game. I don't really remember. It looked terrible. It looked downright terrible. It looked like the PlayStation 1 game, just with smoother graphics. And I don't mean like smooth as in they look natural. I mean like the polygons were very big and very smooth. It was not right. Very sad. Other people say it's a great game. They can have it. I'm just going to avoid it altogether. 11 years ago, on the PlayStation 2, Urban Chaos Riot Response. Who cares? God damn it, Colin, why do you pick these games? Urban Chaos Riot Response? A weird first-person shooter where you play as a SWAT team, or I guess a riot, then you have to, like, disperse people? Was it any good? Yeah, it was kind of good. It wasn't amazing, but it was kind of good. But what's more important is that the developer, this was their very first game. And Warner Brothers was really impressed by it. So impressed they said, we have a great idea for you. And keep this in mind, this is a 2006 PlayStation 2 game. They're like, we want you to work on the PlayStation 3 and the 360. And we have a property we want you to make. It's Batman. Batman? Some no-name developer? What the hell are they gonna do together? Well, they put out none other than the Arkham trilogy. That's right, Rocksteady's very first game ever. Urban Chaos was released on PlayStation 2 11 years ago, and the rest is history right there. Also 11 years ago on the PSP, Metal Gear Solid digital graphic novel was released. I put this in here as kind of a joke. It's unbelievable that you could go into a store and buy a graphic novel that you could only read on your PSP. It was basically just a retelling of the original Metal Gear Solid. Why? Metal Gear was really big. That's the best thing I can say. 12 years ago, on the original Nintendo DS, Kirby Canvas Curse was released. Now, I don't want to overhype this one, but Kirby Canvas Curse, it's not one of my favorite games of all time, but it is undeniably one of the most important games of all time. Basically, the top screen, you had Kirby. I kind of sound like Obama there for a second. You had Kirby. And on the bottom screen, you would draw a rainbow. And Kirby would glide along the rainbow. He'd follow you. For the time, revolutionary. Touchscreen interface and having really good gameplay that was, had urgency to it. Touchscreen gameplay with urgency. That was rare. And there's not much to really say about the game, but I think it was so good that I think it really did influence a lot of developers and what they made on the iPhone when smartphones became more prevalent. I really believe that. Kirby Canvas Curse, 12 years ago, really important game. 13 years ago, on the PlayStation 2, one of my all-time favorites, PSYOPs, The Mindgate Conspiracy. I love it so much I don't even pronounce the name right. PSYOPs, The Mindgate Conspiracy. It's a clunky name. It's a really generic game. Why are we talking about these stupid games? Well, it's because this is one of the last great games from Midway. Yes, Midway, remember them? Much like THQ, they kind of schlubbed through a lot of crap for like the past 2 decades. But in the early 2000s, they started to get their shit in order. There's no other way to phrase it. They actually started putting out amazing games. And PSYOPs, The Mindgate Conspiracy, was one of those games. It was a third-person shooter that had stealth or had action. You could play it really however you wanted, but you had psychic powers. Now, I know psychic powers doesn't sound like a huge deal, but it was one of the very first games that had ragdoll physics and the Havoc engine on consoles. You would pick people up with your mind and throw them into barrels. And it was awesome, because there was kind of a difficulty in the way that you had to control your psychic powers. Oh, and by the way, your psychic powers ran out, so you had to sneak up to people and electrocute them with your mind until their heads explode, and then you drain the psychic energy from them. It was so cool. You could light people on fire, you could pick up random objects. It was badass. Unfortunately, the final couple of missions, you have to fight these invisible bugs. It's really lame. And I just wish we'd get a sequel to PSYOPs, or at least a re-release. So if you're ever in a thrift store, I recommend you pick up a copy of that. It's super good. 14 years ago, in the United States, on the original Xbox, Outlaw Golf was launched. This was a series that, for whatever reason, put out 5 games in the course of 2 years and then just evaporated. Outlaw Golf was basically a golf game, except that the people were rednecks. And I want to make this very clear to you. I am very much against, stereotyping Southerners. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to make fun of their accents. I don't like that. I think that is, in many ways, I almost said presidential. That's it's not a good thing to do. Why the fuck can't I talk right now? But this game, I think, is kind of offensive, because it's like, you're a dumb hillbilly. Now you're playing golf? Those things don't match up, because hillbillies should be playing golf, or sports, or anything. I don't know, it's a bunch of really dumb stereotypes, and women making out with women because, holy shit, lesbians, dude. That's all I need to buy a video game. Game sucked. 17 years ago, Prejudicial. There we go, I got it. 17 years ago, on the Nintendo 64, StarCraft 64 was launched. This is considered one of the worst ports of all time. How can you put an RTS on the Nintendo 64? The answer is you really can't. The frame rate is garbage. But this was the first way I ever played StarCraft, and I really liked it. No apologies. Also 17 years ago on the original PlayStation, The Legend of Dragoon. I think it's safe to say The Legend of Dragoon is the moment when JRPGs jumped the shark. This is the point where it's like, oh boy, this is getting too popular. It was actually developed in the West, if I'm not mistaken, and but it was trying to have like a Japanese feel. Now, The Legend of Dragoon is not a bad game per se. It's fine. It's fine. It's not amazing though, and there were a lot of good JRPGs back then, so maybe you'll overlook this game, and rightfully so. But it was a first-party PlayStation game. Yes, really. There was a first-party JRPG franchise just waiting to be dusted off. You'll find out at E3. I'm just kidding. 18 years ago, on the WonderSwan, Tekken Card Challenge was released. I just put this in here as a joke. And 31 years ago, Now Productions Company Limited was founded. We never give some of these developers credit. Now Production Company is essentially a company that works on everything. I mean, they've worked on things like Sonic Riders, they've worked on Mario Strikers, they've worked on games as far back as the 1980s. 31 years ago, Now Productions was started, and whenever you enjoy a game, whenever you say like, oh, this kind of has the same feel, and then you buy a game from the same developer and it doesn't quite have the same feel, it's probably because they outsourced a lot of that stuff to a different company, like Now Production Company. There's no information on them, really. I try to look up stuff, but they deliberately keep themselves hush-hush. They're not trying to distract or take away from the publicity the publisher and developer receive. But you're getting it today, man. Now Production Company. And 34 years ago, in 1983, Capcom was officially founded. And we already covered that a couple of weeks ago, so we're not going to talk anymore about Capcom's founding. If you want to check that out, go listen back 2 weeks ago. But that is it. That is all. And that's going to have to do it for Strong History. Good show. Jesus, this episode is still going long. I thought this was supposed to be a shorter episode. What the fuck did I do? Well, we better wrap it up right now. It is time to close up the show! All right, what do you need to do this week? Well, you need to come back and listen to all my podcasts about E3. We're going to be doing one on Saturday about EA Play. We're going to be doing 2 on Sunday. First about Microsoft, and then the next about Bethesda. And then on Monday, we're starting off with Ubisoft, and then we're going to be covering PlayStation. And on Tuesday, we're going to be covering all the news from the Nintendo Direct. There's going to be plenty of news in between. I'll be covering it in each individual episode, and maybe we'll have a little bit of runoff in each one of them. It's going to be a huge weekend. You definitely want to check back here. Leave your predictions in the comment below. Do whatever you want. I gotta run right now. I gotta edit this video and get it up so that you guys can watch it tomorrow, and then I can get back to doing more videos. Oh my god! E3 hype, it's alive. But by next week, it's gonna be dead. But the PRESSURECAST will not, because the PRESSURECAST is forever. See you guys!